Thank you. We're going to move on because the government has given councils in Kent, Sussex and Surrey a target of building nearly 29,000 new homes a year. But putting them in rural locations, as we know, is often contentious. Marcella Whittingdale has been speaking to campaigners in the borough of Tunbridge Wells to find out more.
Currently home to a handful of rural hamlets, this landscape's part of plans for more than 6,000 new homes across Tudley, Capel and Paddock Wood.
It will be visible from miles away. It's the effects going forward that are people most concerned about. 20 years of building, construction, traffic. We're also concerned that although the promises for new roads are there and the schools and so on, they won't come at the start. They won't come when they're needed. There'll be this period of development first, infrastructure later.
8,000 people responded to the council's first public consultation on the plans. The second's now due to start in less than a fortnight. What's known as a Regulation 19 consultation. This time campaigners need to persuade a government planning inspector that what's being proposed is unsound.
Come and see New Monaco and get on board the plane. Pack your trunks and snorkel for the flooding when it rains.
While the pandemic's put paid to group events like rallies, the Save Capel campaign have come up with another way to keep their protest in the public eye, a satirical song.
Somebody said this development in the local area is going to be the size of Monaco. I wrote the song with all the aspects of the problems I see in it. There's potential for flooding, all the green belt will be disappeared and taken up. We definitely need housing, but I think it needs to be the right kind of housing in the right place. And the feeling of many of the local people is this is not really the right place to put it when brownfield options are available.
At the moment in the borough of Tunbridge Wells, they're building around 490 homes every year. The government's tasked them with upping that to 678. And that's a picture reflected across the southeast, where the government hopes to increase the number of houses being built by 60% overall. Tunbridge Wells Borough Council have told us it was always going to be difficult to balance housing need with the unique qualities and constraints of the borough. They say they've researched options and alternatives, but have to think about the consequences of if there aren't enough houses for those who need them. Their proposals include 40% affordable housing. The government set a target of building 300,000 new homes across England each year by the mid-2020s. But campaigns like Save Capel say if the right choices aren't made, it could be nothing short of catastrophic for the countryside and the communities who live there.
Catastrophic for the countryside and the communities. Well, let's put that to Claire Coutinho, because there are similar plans, as you know, for a 4,000 home development near South Godstone in your constituency. It's been hugely divisive on Tunbridge District Council. Do you think that project should go ahead?
Well, I mean, I've spoken in Parliament about housing and planning before, because my residents do have concerns, and I work, with the council on that. Obviously, planning does sit with the council. And I think the thing that I would say is, of course, we do need more homes. We know that, but it's got to be in places that people, local residents, accept. And we absolutely must be looking at infrastructure to support those homes, whether that's roads, whether that's GP surgeries or schools, to make sure that all residents have the services and access to infrastructure that they need.
In that specific case that I gave, the 4,000 home development near South Godstone, are you saying therefore that because so many residents are against it, it shouldn't go ahead?
Well, it's currently being looked at. There's conversations between the planning inspector and
as the MP, what's your view? Should it go ahead?
Well, my view is that any homes that go ahead need to be supported by residents and need to be supported by local infrastructure to support.
That's going to be the problem then, isn't it? Because if the government's setting targets, especially in areas like yours, green belt, leafy parts outside London, many communities are going to feel unhappy about the prospect of large-scale house building right next to their communities. So how do we get this right? Are the targets right for a start?
Well, I do think it's good that we've got an ambitious target across the country. I think anyone who speaks to young people at the moment, or as young people in their families, knows it's very difficult for them to get on the housing ladder. And just the fact that we're living so much longer, which is a good thing, puts huge amount of pressure on the housing market. So I do think it's good that we have an ambitious target. I think the really important thing, and one of the things that I've been pushing for locally, is firstly that the homes that are being built are accessible to local people. Because one of the things that we want is that people can have their families nearby to them. We also want to make sure we have got a good degree of affordable homes as well. And lastly, like I said, the infrastructure is there to support them.
So it sounds like you think the target of 138% more homes being built in Tandridge in the coming years, that's been set by the government for the local council, is right. And what you're saying is, as long as the infrastructure's there and people are happy that they're built, they should go ahead. How are we going to achieve that?
Well, so just in terms of targets, that's an ongoing conversation that we're having. I know that the council has done work over the last couple of years to get the targets down to a level they feel is acceptable to residents. But I think the most important thing, as you say, is that residents are happy.
Right. And if they're not, what happens then? And because it, you know, clearly, as I've just given you as an example, we've just seen it in Tunbridge Wells. When we're talking about the number of homes, you've talked about an ambitious target. An ambitious target in leafy areas is controversial. So what should happen?
Well, like I said, I think there's different things that we can put in place to make sure that residents are happy. But you also have a consultation part of the planning process, which councils run, where they hear from residents. And I think in the Tunbridge Wells examples that you mentioned, all political parties have supported it. And I'm sure there'll be, opportunities for residents to feed in as well.
And sorry, one more on this. Then if they're not happy, you just impose it on them?
Well, no, that's not exactly how it works. What happens is you have a local plan which is agreed by councils with consultation programmes with residents.
Then you don't build the houses, is the logical conclusion of that.
Well, you have to look at residents as a whole. Obviously, if you only have one person objecting, you can't, not build the houses. But you need to have a robust planning process with enough consultation to make sure that residents as a whole are happy.
Let's bring in Sasha. If you were representing those people we've just heard from in Capel and Tudley, what would you say to them about the prospect of those new homes?
Well, I would look into more of the detail of this. What stood out for me in that clip was that they were saying about floods. Why would you want to build somewhere that there's going to be a risk of flooding going on? So for me, questions will be rising about how are we going to tackle that flooding? Is it something that's viable? Are residents, if you did build this in the long-term future, going to suffer from that? And if this is an issue that can't be cleared up, for instance, then I would be championing with the residents to try and fight this case.
Right. Well, Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, by the way, have told us they've looked at this in detail. They've looked at alternatives, and this is the best place to build given the target they've been set. So again, to you, Sasha, if we've got these targets but residents aren't happy, what do we do? What's the answer here?
Well, funnily enough, I actually am a councillor for a new estate, actually, that used to be cherry orchard fields and apple trees. So I do have an understanding of, in some respects, of how neighbouring residents feel about that. And I can assure you that most of them weren't happy about it, but the people that are actually who are living there are very happy with the situation. I would, though, look at what Claire said about infrastructure, because that is massive. If the infrastructure can't handle the area, then you're in trouble. So for instance, where I am in Dartford, we have one of the biggest traffic issues going on in the whole country, especially when it comes to air pollution, which is really high in Dartford. And is the infrastructure there necessary to handle that? No, it isn't. And that's the problem we have, is that we don't have infrastructure in place. And if the infrastructure is not going to be in place in Tunbridge, then we're at a losing start already.
Claire, one last one to you, really. How worried are you politically that this issue in the coming years will cost the Conservatives, as it has done in Tandridge, seats on local councils?
Well, I think we need to get the balance right. It's really important that we are building homes and providing, that access for residents. And like I said, one of the things I particularly care about is that people have the ability to have their families living nearby. But of course, we need to do that in a way that isn't putting pressure on infrastructure and public services. And that's a balance that we're going to have to keep trying to get right.
OK, we're going to move on.